Mr. President.
Majority Leader.
Now, tomorrow morning, Leader McConnell and I will welcome Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky to the Senate. This will be the third time President Zelensky meets with senators since the start of the war, and it will be his most important visit of all. The war in Ukraine stands at a crossroads with our friends in desperate need of American aid to maintain pressure on Vladimir Putin. The last time President Zelensky spoke to the Senate, he warned us that without more aid, Ukraine would lose the war. Simple as that. Earlier today, warned military officers at the National Defense University that, quote, if there's anyone inspired by unresolved issues on Capitol Hill, it is just Putin and his sick clique. So, if there's a word for what we most need this week, the word is to be serious about the task at hand. If Republicans in the Senate do not show they're serious about finalizing an agreement for the national security package, Vladimir Putin is going to walk through Ukraine and right through Europe. Both parties understand that aiding Ukraine and resisting Putin are critical for our national security. But Republicans, and only Republicans, are holding everything up because of unrealistic, maximalist demands on the border. Last week, we put forth a serious bill to address our national security needs. The package included robust border security provisions. Republicans rejected it out of hand, demanding their way or the highway, even though they were offered an amendment of their choosing. And they'd only need 11 Democrats to go along. This posture is unserious. Again, Republicans, and only Republicans, are holding everything up because of unrealistic, maximalist demands on the border. I want to be very clear. Democrats very much want an agreement if possible. We talked all weekend with our Republican counterparts to find some kind of agreement. We talked again earlier today. We are not there yet, but as a sign of good faith, Democrats are going to keep trying. If Republicans keep insisting on Donald Trump's border policies, then they will be at fault when a deal for aid to Ukraine, Israel, and humanitarian aid to Gaza fall apart. The onus is on Republicans to show they're willing to moderate. Let me say that again. If Republicans keep insisting on Donald Trump's border policies, then they will be at fault when a deal for Ukraine, Israel, and humanitarian aid to Gaza all fall apart. Republicans would be giving Vladimir Putin the best gift he could ask for. Democrats are serious about reaching reasonable bipartisan compromise to pass this package. The question is if Republicans are now willing to do the same. On NDAA, at the beginning of December, I said the Senate has three major priorities before the end of the year. First, we needed to end the blanket holds on hundreds of military nominees by the senator from Alabama. We have now done that. And before we finish for the year, the Senate plans to move to confirm the 11 four-star military officers waiting confirmation. Second, we must pass the annual defense authorization bill, which has been one of the most bipartisan priorities in Congress for over 60 years. This will be our focus on the floor this week. Third, and hardest of all, we must reach an agreement on the National Security Supplemental. We're still working. And while we are not near an agreement yet, we're going to keep pushing as the week progresses. Last week, I filed cloture on the NDAA conference report, and we expect to move forward on the NDAA conference report after lunch tomorrow. At a time of huge trouble for global security, passing the defense authorization bill is more important than ever. This year's NDAA makes strong down payments in outcompeting the Chinese Communist Party, particularly by approving President Biden's trilateral U.S., U.K., and Australia nuclear submarine agreement. We've been working on AUKUS all year, and it's one of the most important tools we have against the Chinese government, and it's a major accomplishment to get it done. I want to thank the Chairman of the Armed Services Committee, Jack Reed, and Ranking Member Wicker for their good work in shepherding this bill through committee and through the conference process. I commend all conferees for their good work over the past few weeks, and I thank my colleagues for working together to to ensure the Senate's six-decade streak of passing the NDAA remains unbroken. Now on judges and nominations. Today, the Senate will confirm the 39th Circuit Judge under President Biden, Richard Federico, to be Circuit Judge for the 10th Circuit. Mr. Federico is precisely the type of judge we need on our circuit courts, a brilliant legal mind who has dedicated his life to service as a lawyer in the Navy and as a public defender. Thanks to the work of President Biden and this Senate majority, we've confirmed more public defenders to circuit courts than under any president in history. Of course, we also confirmed the first ever public defender to sit on the U.S. Supreme Court, the great Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson. And now, this Senate majority has confirmed over 160 judges to lifetime appointments on the bench, including more black judges, more women judges, and more judges of color than the full first term of any other president. More women to circuit courts than any president in their entire time in office. The first Muslim American woman on the federal bench, the first Navajo federal judge, and of course, as I mentioned, the first black woman on the Supreme Court, Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson. All year long, this Senate majority has prioritized confirming judges who add to the bench's personal and professional diversity, and we're going to continue going into the new year. Now on student debt and the letter we sent. Today I sent a letter with several of my Democratic colleagues, including Senators Warren, Padilla, and Sanders, to the Secretary of Education, urging him to continue the department's expansion of student debt relief to working and middle-class borrowers. The Biden administration has already taken historic steps to reduce the burden of student loan debt for tens of millions of Americans. But following the Supreme Court's cruel blocking of student debt relief, too many borrowers, too many, remain saddled with massive, in many cases, unbearable amounts of debt. We can and must do more to help these borrowers. So as the Education Department is engaged in the rulemaking process for student debt relief, our letter specifically urges the administration to, 1, eliminate all debt that exceeds the original principal balance of the loan. 2, provide full cancellation for borrowers who have repaid enough to recover their original principal. And 3, extend relief to borrowers victimized by student loan servicer misconduct or error and other common sense measures to help borrowers. I want to thank Senators Warren, Padilla, and Sanders, as well as Representatives Presley, Omar, and Wilson for their leadership on this letter. And I look forward to working with the Biden administration to make sure relief reaches every borrower in need. And now on Albany Nanotech. Earlier today, Mr. President, I joined Governor Hochul and Albany leaders to announce a historic $10 billion public-private partnership to make the Albany Nanotech Complex the most advanced center for semiconductor research in the entire world. It's a landmark day for the Capital Region. This $10 billion Capital Region in New York, that's Albany, Schenectady, and Troy, and that Tri-City area. This $10 billion partnership, spurred by the CHIPS and Science Act, will bring the most cutting-edge semiconductor machinery on the planet to Albany and propel Albany Nanotech as the premier global center for semiconductor research. Today's announcements will mean hundreds of new high-paying tech jobs, hundreds of construction jobs, and a tidal wave of scientific innovation that engineers today cannot even fathom. When I wrote the CHIPS and Science Act, I had precisely regions like Albany and upstate New York in mind, because these communities have so much to offer for America's semiconductor future. As we enter the home stretch for the selection of major hubs of the National Semiconductor Technology Center, today's $10 billion announcement will strengthen Albany and upstate New York's case as the best region to lead the next generation of innovations in America's microchip industry. Today's announcement comes on the same day as the announcement by the Commerce Department of the first funding agreement from the CHIPS incentive programs. BAE Systems will receive $35 million to quadruple its production capacity for chips essential to our national security, including for F-35 fighter jets. This award, like today's announcement in Albany, shows that the CHIPS and Science Act is delivering for American workers and for our national security. So it's an exciting time for New York tech, with major announcements from companies like Micron, IBM, Global Foundries, and so many others made possible because of chips and science. And I believe the best for New York's semiconductor industry is still to come. I yield the floor. You going, Roger? I yield.